Welcome back. So now that you have a handle on all of the different components of what go into a site-to-site VPN, what we're going to do now over the next few lessons is configure a site-to-site VPN that connects our VNet Az2 network with our VNet on-prem network. VNet Az2 is a virtual network that I deployed earlier this morning to prepare for this particular lab. So to get started on the deployment of a site-to-site VPN, what we need to do is deploy the gateway subnet. So to deploy the gateway subnet, we're going to go ahead and click on our VNet Az2 virtual network here. And then from here, I can go into subnets under settings. Now you can see on your screen, we already see the subnet Az2 that I created as part of the initial deployment of the virtual network. And we see the address range for this network is 192.167. Now to create our gateway subnet, we simply click Gateway Subnet, and then we supply some information. Now you'll notice here, we can't change the name of our gateway subnet. Azure calls it Gateway Subnet, and that's all it ever is. There's no way to change this name. Now in the address range for the subnet, we need to specify an address range. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the other lesson, this address range should be a /27 or 28. Now, I'm not an IP subnetting guru. It's admittedly been one of my weaknesses throughout my entire IT career. So I cheat here a little bit. Instead of trying to figure out a /27 or 28 address range that fits within the overall address space, what I do is I use the gateway calculator PowerShell command. The gateway subnet calculator is a script I downloaded from Microsoft some time ago, and I rely on it when I'm creating gateway subnets for site-to-site VPNs. So let me pull it up here. Okay, so what this gateway subnet script does is look at your existing virtual network, the virtual network for which you're going to create the subnet for, takes that information and then spits out a properly formed gateway subnet. The script is really easy to use since all you need to do is supply the information for your virtual network. It does everything else. So what I'm going to do here is enter the information for my virtual network here. We already have 192.167.0.0/16. And then this G variable is the mask that we want to use for our gateway subnet. So we'll leave this at 28 and we'll save our calculator. So now what I'll do is I'll pull up PowerShell. So now I'll run this as an administrator. With our calculator edited, all we need to do is switch over to where our calculator is. And before we run our GW calculator script, I need to set my PowerShell execution policy to unrestricted. I need to do this because my script isn't signed. And since my script isn't signed, if I don't set my PowerShell environment to unrestricted, it's going to throw up when I try to run it. So let's set execution policy. So what we're doing here is we're calling the set execution policy command, specifying the execution policy switch, and setting it to unrestricted. When we do this, it's going to ask me if we're sure. We'll go ahead and hit yes. And now it's set. Now to run our GW calculator, you just go ahead and run it up. And we can see that it dumps out a gateway that we can use for our virtual network. Let's bounce back into our dashboard here. And we'll paste our value in. We can see that it gets the green checkbox, so it's valid. If we try to use an address range here that doesn't fit with our defined address space, it will error out here. We're not going to use any route tables, so we can close this out. Again, we're not using any service endpoints. We saw this earlier. If you select the drop down here, you can see all the different options that are available. We're not using service endpoints, so we'll leave this not selected. And we're not going to use subnet delegation. Now, if you hover over the icon here for delegation and click Learn More, we can see here that delegation essentially refers to the practice of delegating a subnet to a specific Azure service. And you can read a little bit more about delegation on Microsoft's site, but we're not worried about delegation here. So we'll go ahead and switch back over, and we'll click OK. And then we see our gateway subnet show up. Now, it's important to note that when you deploy a gateway subnet, that you do not assign any kind of network security groups to it or any kind of traffic rules. Microsoft handles all of that stuff in the background. That's not something that you should be doing. So now that we have our gateway subnet deployed, we can go ahead and create the virtual network gateway, which we'll do that in the next lesson.